Welcome to 7 Investing Now, a show that teaches you how to take a long-term view on investing by better understanding what's happening in the market now.
Good afternoon, 7 investors, and welcome to the Monday edition of 7 Investing Now. My name, of course, is Daniel Brooks Kline. I'm being joined today by Maxx Chatsko. Max, how are you holding up?
Pretty good. It's still cloudy here in Pittsburgh, but it's been like that since August. I don't think I've seen the sun since August, Dan. So, you know.
Yeah, I got back to West Palm Beach and was all excited that it was like in the 80s. I was going to go swimming on Sunday, and it immediately dropped to like 70. And like me from like 2 years ago might go swimming in 70. Me from having lived here for 4 years isn't doing that. Before we get started talking about the next big thing in tech, and that's going to be our lead subject today, I want to talk a little about our personal tech. So as some of you know, Max is broadcasting at home. I'm broadcasting in a dedicated studio space I've built in my house. But the problem is I'm not a handy person. So I've thrown a lot of money at solving the problem. Sam Bailey, if you could share what my setup looks like. I shared a picture. So as you can see, I built this little arm thing and it has my monitor sitting on it, my laptop on one hand, a monitor on the other. But Max, can you see the little black square on my monitor?
Yeah, what is that?
That is a dead spot. So I got, and Sam, you can put us back up. I got this arm and it didn't tell me I needed a monitor that has like the fixture that your TV has where you can just like click the thing in. So I had to buy this like weird X bracket that's holding it and put that together. And this all took me like 3 hours. Cause again, like if my car gets a flat tire, I get a new car. Like I'm not capable of fixing anything. Like I once was so proud of myself that I changed a light bulb and then 3 seconds later heard a giant smash as the entire fixture fell to the ground. So not handy, but I get all this set up. I instead of returning the monitor and getting the right one that has the right hookup, I get this device and then I plug everything in and the damn monitor has like a dead spot. Like clearly it was like dropped or something in submission. So it is not working for me, but we're going to talk the next big thing in tech. And of course, we would like your questions. If there's anything you want to talk about in the biotech space, in the investing space, what's going on now, what isn't, get your questions and comments in. We will be happy to take them as we go along. So Max, let's talk about the next big thing in tech. The smartphone is arguably the last big thing in tech. The iPhone, which came out in 2007, that's unfathomable to me, kind of changed everything. It put a smartphone as kind of a necessity. Like back when there was a BlackBerry, that was a luxury. Business guys had the BlackBerry. But smartphone sales have started to decline. They've fallen for 2 straight years. And everybody out there is looking for the next big thing. So what do we know isn't the next big thing? Max, I'll throw out 3D television. Remember that? Not the next big thing. 3D printing, I think it could be bigger than it is. Also not the next big thing. But and I'll throw it to you here, Max. A lot of people think it's going to be augmented reality, and Apple, Google, Facebook, Sesame Street Workshop, anybody you could think of is working on augmented reality devices. I don't believe this is going to be the next thing. Max, what are your thoughts on augmented reality?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I could see like niche applications where it might take off, right? You think like gaming or something, or maybe like maps and navigation. I don't know. It's kind of tough to see it from where we're sitting now. But I also don't want to be the guy who says it's never going to work, and then this is a soundbite 10 years from now, and then I have no career, no reputation. So I'm going to leave some room for doubt. But I actually was one of the first people to have Google Glass way back in the day. So my brother's a developer. He's in the beta programs. He got it, and then he got to share it with 3 other people. He shared it with 2 way more important people than me, and then his little brother for some reason. So I got to walk around with it. And, it was kind of cool. More of a novelty thing. Wasn't really that useful, but you could see like where it might be headed. So I don't want to base anything on first generation tech from the mid 2010s, but my experience with Google Glass was that it left a lot to be desired, and it maybe wasn't as practical as you might think when you're walking around with glasses on and you can get your email and text on a little screen up here, but you have your phone in your pocket, and it's way easier to look at that. So, I don't know what these next generation devices have, but, not as practical as you might think.
So Max, you're right that you can't judge things off the first generation. You may not even remember what this was, but I had an Apple Newton, which for those of you who are younger, the Apple Newton was kind of the predecessor to the iPad and the iPhone. It was this big, giant, clunky device that was supposed to have handwriting recognition. And it essentially couldn't do anything more than like a basic calendar with like an address book function, but you could see kind of where the world was going. But when I look at augmented reality, I don't think it's going to be headsets. Now, Apple is working on a headset. They've been testing one for years. Microsoft has the HoloLens, which, again, surgical applications, design applications for buildings and things like that, those business applications I see as logical. But Max, do you think people are going to, forget that Apple's price point might be $3,000 or even $2,000? Do you actually think people who don't wear glasses or generally wear a headset are going to wear a headset or glasses unless it's literally like, the Tony Stark glasses from Avengers that just like control absolutely everything?
Yeah, I don't know. I have a tough time seeing it. I mean, I have perfect vision, Dan, as you know, and I don't know if I would wear a headset just to get augmented reality. I'm kind of, pretty simple and minimalistic as it is, so maybe I'm not the best example. But with these price points too, it's important to point out. I mean, isn't that one of the reasons that smartphone sales have been declining? Like people kind of woke up and were like, "Do I need to spend $1,200 on a phone when I'm just gonna like text and search social media and like play Candy Crush all day?" You don't need like the souped up processors for that. So, and we've seen that, right, with different companies issuing, more like budget phones, right? Pixel is like the 4A now. iPhone, I think it's the SE, right, is like their budget version of a phone. And like, that's good enough for most people. So, you're going to spend $3,000 on a headset. I mean, there always will be people, and like, it's like any new technology, right? It's to come down the cost curve. So maybe 5 years from now, it's a lot cheaper, but yeah, it might have a tough time getting off the ground. I don't know.
So I think the problem is with smartphones, and we talked about it's a declining trend. And the reason for it is, so even if you're Apple, and I think Apple is a good investment, and we're going to talk about sort of investing in the next big thing and how risky that can be. But here's the problem. So I have the iPhone, is it a 12? Whatever the newest one is, I have. And it is appreciably no different than the one before it or the one before that. Now, it does have the MagSafe technology, which is pretty cool that it can click into the charger or to the thing in my car to hold it. That's kind of neat, but it's not game changing. It's not the difference of not having Siri or having Siri. It's not the difference of Apple Wallet or facial recognition. It does feel like we've kind of maxed out where phones can be. But so I have an Oculus Go, and it's a fine novelty device. You can play some games like, hey, I'm hang gliding, but nobody's ever going to wear a big bulky headset. Max, is it more likely that we see augmented reality in like the screens of our cars or in other places? Like, maybe there's an overlay for doctors in a surgical suite where it's not necessarily glasses. It's something giving them, real-time information in their field of view. Like, I know it'd be valuable to be able to see even just my GPS on my dashboard as I go. Not my Netflix movie, that would be dangerous, but my GPS or that I'm about to run out of gas or whatever it is. Is that more practical for where we should be looking to invest in AR?
Yeah, I mean, that seems much more practical. And the healthcare thing is interesting too. When my older brother had Google Glass, that was one of the applications I think Google was talking about at the time. And the company my brother worked at was involved in perhaps, could a doctor be wearing this when they're performing surgery to make sure they're targeting the right tissues or so on, right? So those types of applications maybe make more sense, maybe even initially as well, than, hey, you can, catch more Pokemon if you wear these glasses or whatever, some application like that.
I stuck with Pokemon Go for a very, very long time. It was unbelievably fun. But at no point did I ever play the augmented reality version of the game. Like, it was not exciting to me that the Pokemon were kind of sort of at the restaurant I was in. It was just sort of the monotonous fun of playing it. Even that eventually wore off.
Dan falls asleep with his glasses on and wakes up to a Pikachu standing next to him.
I could only hope. MP Fitzgerald says, like a Palm Pilot. Sort of. A Palm Pilot was sort of a predecessor of the iPhone, maybe even after the Newton. The Newton was much bigger. It was a very bulky, there was actually a whole chapter on this in my book, Worst Ideas Ever, which they don't send me any money if you buy, but there are digital copies out there. And really, it was one of those things where you could look at it and go, this failed, but it might work. My challenge with investing in any company, whether it's Facebook because they own Oculus, Microsoft because they own HoloLens, Apple because they're investing in this space, is I don't see a demand for this product, Max. Like even the Avengers glasses, if you don't have an Iron Man suit, what's the benefit of those? Correct me if I'm wrong, but like, are you missing a lot of real-time data? Maybe sports gamblers would want something, or like coaches, like that could be, where you're really getting like real-time stats and plays or something. But I don't know, Max, is this sort of like companies trying to solve a problem that isn't a problem?
Yeah, I mean, you can see why everyone's getting involved, right? Like, it might not be an opportunity, but everyone almost needs a strategy because you don't want to be the odd company out, right? You have like Amazon and Apple and Google investing in it. Well, Facebook can't sit out because if it is a thing, then they're going to hear about it years later when investors were wondering why they don't have any AR. And of course, they're one of the leaders in the space, right? So maybe that was a bad example, but you know what I mean. So you can see why they have a strategy, and then if it doesn't work, they can say, we tried.
Yeah, I feel like you're chasing nothing here. That the best technology solves a problem. So let's seg over to it. Max Lucas, we will take your question in the question segment we're going to do to the end of this. I have a whole bunch of comments from Twitter that we're going to take as well. But Max, you're in the biotech, the healthcare space. I know that's a very broad way to describe what you do. But I think I have an Apple Watch, and the Apple Watch, in my opinion, solves a problem. So it does a couple of things. It forces me to move every day. If I don't move a certain amount, if I don't stand up a certain amount of time, I don't close my rings. And if I don't close my rings every day, my trainer's allowed to do the punch me in the stomach thing while I do sit-ups. No, not literally, but we do monitor it. So I am beholden to it. It also shows me my heart rate. So I've started to learn what causes my heart rate to rise. I've made efforts to lower my resting heart rate and really track that. And it can start to do some rudimentary things like check whether my heart is in rhythm. I feel like going forward, and maybe I'm wrong, that we're going to have wearables that like can tell a diabetic. I mean, these exist, but like mainstream, everyone has one wearables that just have these functions built in where like it'll be able to tell you you're vitamin C deficient, a diabetic that you need insulin, or your blood sugar's low, a distance runner that you need potassium, like whatever it is. Am I wrong in thinking that solves a real problem and that will become a major part of sort of the medical chain as we go forward?
Yeah, I think there's a big opportunity in healthcare. And we were kind of talking about this recently, you and I, maybe at a happy hour. I don't remember when it was. I don't think it was a public facing thing. But, I was actually, so I'm like one of the first people to call out hype, right? But I've also been impressed with how Apple's managed to get relatively accurate data about heart rates from, a wrist wearable. That's always been a challenge in healthcare, right? A lot of these devices, you need electrodes on your chest, right? If you go into a hospital, hopefully not. But they put it there. They try to get as many readings and to try to get an accurate reading as possible. So to get the data that Apple does from a wrist is actually very impressive. Now there's, there are limitations to what kind of data we can collect from a wearable, from an external device in terms of human health. But I don't doubt that we're going to find ways to collect a lot more data, not just heart rate. Like you said, we can maybe analyze sweat and determine electrolyte contents or something like that. So there's two ways to look at it though, right? I mean, when you go to your doctor, maybe you go once a year, right? You get like they check your weight and your blood pressure, maybe you do a blood draw and they compare it to what you did last year. And for most people, it really, that's all you need. You need to go once a year. The body is a self-regulating machine. We're biologic. We're doing what we're supposed to be doing. So there's an argument that you really don't need 24/7 data for all of these things, right? It's just overkill. But there's the other argument where maybe, by having 24/7 heart data, for tens of thousands or millions of people, now we have data to start to correlate that to other health indicators, right? Maybe there's some way to, correlate that to, Alzheimer's onset, 20 years out or something, right? We're seeing a lot of crazy things like that in AI that aren't very intuitive, and you need a lot of data to even correlate. So there's that argument as well. And, I'm a nerd. I have spreadsheets for everything, Dan. So I lean towards give me more data. Let's figure it out. If it's nothing, oh, well. So I think you're right. But it's one of those things. Is it a big opportunity? Is it a gargantuan opportunity? Like we kind of can't really pin it down yet. But
I actually think it is, because people want to be told what to do. I as much as anybody, in areas where you're not naturally inclined. So my watch telling me you haven't walked enough today, go walk, has literally added 7 or 8 miles a week of moving for me. It's lowered my resting heart rate considerably. It's improved my recovery time. And it's hard to tell here on whatever platform we're using that, but I've lost some weight. And I've been lifting weights and working out with a trainer and doing all the things I was supposed to do aside from moving enough. So that was meaningful. But if it could also tell me, oh, hey, Dan, like you need more protein, or geez, you worked out, but you didn't drink enough water, like you're 12 ounces of water in deficit. I feel like that kind of gimmick is actually meaningful to people. And if you tie that into like, oh, wow, like maybe we can notice the signs of a heart attack 36 hours in advance and send you a get to the hospital alert. Oh, and by the way, tie in with Uber and have Uber deliver you to the hospital, not stopping by for a pizza on the way. But, there's, I think, and we're going to get to what you think the big opportunities are. I think healthcare overall is the biggest opportunity for Apple. It's the biggest opportunity for Google. It's the biggest opportunity for Microsoft. Do I think that's all going to be devices? No. I think there's going to be a massive overhaul in how healthcare is provided. Max, it's more your space than mine. I like gadgets. Do you disagree? Do you think I think the healthcare system is just so fundamentally broken that like Google and Amazon have a much better chance of fixing it than like Aetna?
Yeah, again, I tend to be a little more cautious. Some of it is hype, right? There's a lot of concerns too here in terms of like data and privacy. We already seen problems with that, right? It's been difficult for Google to, ethically get its hands on healthcare data and the amount and volume it needs in order to, have any insight into some of these applications. So there's some concerns there. And again, it's just, some of it is a little hypey in terms of what we can tell from external devices right now.
And it's one of those where I'm very wary of investing in purely speculative companies. If you tell me who's going to be the leading healthcare wearable, I would tend to think it's going to be Apple or Google or somebody you've heard of.
That's a good point. Yeah. I mean, if anyone's going to do it, it's going to be these big companies, right? Not some startup that just SPAC'd and is a $400 million company or something, right? So yeah, that's right. A good point.
Now, but Max, for like very specific things, let's say, pretend this is possible, a wearable that helps leukemia patients monitor their white blood cell count. I think all of those words make sense in the context I was using them. And I have a cousin who's struggling, who has, managed leukemia, and he has to go get his numbers checked a lot. If there was a wearable, now that's an area where I think startups, very specific devices, I think aren't the game Apple plays. But of course, you always run the risk that Apple is accidentally going to have the very specific feature and then just knock your company. I'm sure my cousin would prefer to wear an Apple Watch than a specific, blood cancer watch or whatever it's called.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen that already, like, Tandem Diabetes Care, right? It was a tiny little company. It never really was successful. And then it was successful. And now it's like very successful, right? Growing at a good clip. It's, I believe it's profitable by now. So like a good example of that, like it's a niche application. Apple said no or whatever, just didn't think it was worth its time. And now you have these other companies that are, leading that space. So yeah, that's another good point. Look at you, all these good points, Dan.
Tandem Diabetes would be an awesome name for a punk band. We are going to take some of your questions and comments about what the next big thing is. This is an interactive forum. So I see a few questions in there. I see a few comments. We'd love to see some more. They don't have to be about this. We're going to have some open time at the end of the show. So if there's anything in the investing world you want to weigh in on, go ahead. But via Twitter, Max Lucas said, and again, these are your ideas for the next big thing. I think you're starting to see it, but the micro business / freelance economy will grow. Not the commodity freelance economy like Uber and DoorDash, but the professional freelance and micro business economy created by Fiverr, Etsy, and Shop. Max, I like what Etsy is doing. I think there's a demand for one platform to sell crafts, and there's an ability to set prices. I'm really sketchy about Fiverr. I think the quality of work you get done on Fiverr is generally like, hey, can I get the placeholder graphic until the real guy does it? Like, I'm not as big a fan, but I do agree with what Max Lucas is saying. I do think the world is going to be more people who aren't working a traditional job and more of a transactional based economy. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I would agree. And, I've read some books and listened to some podcasts about this, but there's almost this like fundamental shift that needs to happen, right? If you think about it, like the macro view of, we still kind of train people to be like good factory workers, right? That's not really how the economy works anymore. But yeah, if you were a contractor, worked for yourself and you had an LLC to handle taxes and all that, all those nightmares, right, for accounting. But yeah, then you could maybe go sell things on Etsy or do things on Fiverr or some other platform like that. I think that's definitely going to be more common. It's already pretty common. I don't know any stats off the top of my head, but like numbers are much higher than I thought when I saw them. How many people are in the freelancer or gig economy? And there's also like this gray zone, right? You're either employed or you're not. Like we need to kind of change some laws too to
Yeah, I think you and I know that gray zone as well as everybody. And I do think, and I don't want to belabor this, but there needs to be almost like a third category where if you work for a company X amount of hours and it's a company of a certain size, they're paying a certain percentage into a pool where you can get benefits or what. That needs to be a big overhaul. I actually think as an investing opportunity, companies that are facilitating that tend to be a good investment. That being said, one that's out there that people always throw up to me is Upwork. And Max, you're familiar with Upwork. I'm familiar with Upwork, but I actually, at our previous place, managed paying people in Upwork, and they are not friendly to freelancers. And I am very concerned about a company whose entire business is being a freelance marketplace that takes a ridiculous cut of your earnings and makes it very difficult if they didn't help the company find you, the company had you and puts you into their system, wants a very high cut. So I am not at all a fan. Roman Michael, I see your question in my personal Facebook page. I don't know why that doesn't share to the group. We're going to get to that in the latter half of the show. So there's a good question there. We will absolutely take it. It's not directly related. David says, I actually do think it will be in the biotech space. I really believe in this decade, a cure for cancer will be here, and it will be the gene editing and therapy space. Max, we don't just need one cure for cancer, right? Like we need a lot of cures for cancer. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that was going to be my point. So it's kind of a two-parter. First, we talk in the public discourse, we say the words cure for cancer, and that's not accurate at all because, if you have non-small cell lung cancer or you have liver cancer or you have acute myeloid leukemia, well, those three things are cancers and become cancers for three different reasons. So there's not one thing we can target at the biomolecular level to stop or, put all of those into remission. So we need individual cures for individual cancers. I would also caution that, doctors they hate the C word. They hate saying cure. And that's, when you think about it, it's true, right? We put things into remission. We're not sure if it's going to come back in a year or 10 years or 5 years. So it's not necessarily a cure in the sense of, you're don't have that thing anymore, right? This is especially true for rare diseases because we will start to see some, things put into remission with gene editing or gene therapy, right, going forward. But you have to remember, these aren't cures because a lot of times there's organ damage and we might be able to change the genetic defect, but we're not reversing the damage that's been done to the rest of the body, right? And there's some good examples of this, like there's been some gene therapies that are on the market now for rare forms of blindness. So we can treat children with this and, they see better, right? They can operate a microwave when they couldn't do that before, but can they operate a car? We don't know that yet, right? So it's not the same as they have perfect vision, they're walking around and they're these superhumans because we have gene editing and gene therapy now. There's a lot more nuance to consider there.
So Max, is it more about managing cancer? I mean, nobody talks about the fact that I don't want to say have cured HIV, but HIV isn't the death sentence it once was. At least if you have money, it isn't the death sentence it once was. And that's sort of underwhelming because it's not actually a cure. It's sort of like, here's what you have to do the rest of your life, and this probably won't be what kills you. Is that what's likely to happen with cancer and other sort of insidious diseases?
Yeah, that's probably true. It's more about management. And again, another component of this is we're also getting better at detecting these diseases or these cancers at earlier stages of development. So, if you detect it when it's before it's, stage 4 or stage 3 and it's in your lymph nodes or elsewhere in your body, then we do have much better potential for your long-term survival. Again, so maybe it's remission for the rest of your life or decades instead of a couple of years. We're also getting better at, pinpointing or boxing in cancer, right? We can treat it very well initially with some of our current generation therapies, but cancer is going to mutate. It's going to find other ways to evade, that treatment. So we're finding better combination therapies to kind of box in all the mutations that are possible so that a cancer really does die and get put into remission for a very long time. So management is probably a better word. And that's, again, to the point of doctors hate the C word for cure. They talk about the durability of, these treatments. So, I would say focus on the durability of the response, not the cure word, right?
It's also important to know, and Max, I'm not quite this old, but is it fair to say we're only about 100 years removed from when a bad cut that gets infected had a decent chance of killing you? Like we've come a really long way. Even in my lifetime, that things that probably killed my grandparents, at least on my mother's side, who died fairly young, probably wouldn't have killed them now.
Yeah, I one of my hobbies is I collect antique science books. Again, I'm a nerd. So I've read some books on like the history of genetics or eugenics. That's like a dirty word now, right? But back in the day, that was this like amazing breakthrough. Oh, we can have eugenics. We can control populations of people at the genetic level. Obviously, I understand that's a terrible idea now. But back then, because people were surrounded by death, people died in childbirth. The mortality rate of people under 5 was very high. And yeah, you could die from getting a cut on your finger, right? I think it was like President McKinley's son died from getting a cut by a rose at the White House. Something, I might be mixing up that president, but it wasn't that long ago. People were dying for things that we don't even think twice about now. It's more of an inconvenience.
So we're talking the next big thing. You're watching 7 Investing now. And again, I will give a little note of caution. As investors, it's very exciting to decide that, the next big thing is biotech or agricultural tech or techity tech or whatever it is. It doesn't matter. And then go find a bunch of obscure companies and invest in them. And the reality is that strategy requires a level of expertise of someone like Maxx Chatsko, of our own Manisha Samy, who are covering the biotech space, and they are separating the wheat from the chaff. Like that is not something like I could hear about a company and it could sound awesome, but the reality is it could be a bad idea. It could be a company that's great at executing but terrible at marketing. It could be something that's going to be so expensive that it doesn't matter that it's a cure for whatever. Nobody's ever going to be able to get it. There's a lot of nuance to this, and that's true in technology as well. If you see, I saw the early demo of the Microsoft HoloLens where mostly we played Minecraft, but for the most, they showed off some of the cool things they could do. And I could see that the high-end business implications, if you were designing a 90-story skyscraper in a city and to show what your plans are going to look like, you put a HoloLens on everybody and they sign off on your $400 million building or your $1 billion sports stadium. Well, that's going to be worth a whole bunch of $2,000 HoloLenses. If you can put a HoloLens on in LA and direct a surgery in Sydney, Australia, that's going to be worth whatever it costs. But if HoloLens makes it more fun for me to play, I don't know, Batman Arkham Asylum, that's not that important. Like, I'm sure my son would want, a headset so he could play like more and more immersive Fortnite or whatever he's playing. He's not playing Fortnite, whatever he's playing now. But I don't think those are going to be game changers. So it's really easy to talk yourself in as an investor that these are great ideas, that these are the next big things. And then even some of the things that are the next big thing. So let's look at cannabis. And people all the time, oh my God, cannabis is going to be legal. We see increasing legality. All these companies are going to do great. Well, actually, cannabis is kind of like milk. It's pretty much a ubiquitous product. It's not that hard to make, and it's really hard to make money in the space. Doesn't mean there aren't winners in cannabis. There are absolutely going to be some big winners in cannabis, but it's probably not the people whose main thing is growing cannabis. So you've got to be really careful here. AR might be a thing. I don't think it's going to be the next big thing. Panda Capital says, what about quantum computing in 5 to 10 years? Max, you live next to the Pittsburgh Giant Computer and French Fry Hut or whatever it's called. Quantum computing to me still seems like it's going to be really useful, but I don't have any need for quantum computing, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, obviously, initially this will be like commercial applications, right? And in my little area of the market for biotech and biology, quantum computing could be huge, right? We could almost instantly solve a lot of these problems that take us years and years and decades today with today's computing power. I have no insight into whether it's 5 or 10 years away or how viable it's going to be at the commercial level in 5 or 10 years. We're making great progress, but I don't know how soon that is coming in terms of an investing opportunity either, right?
It feels really important. It doesn't feel like the next big thing. Now, it might be the next big thing in terms of serving humanity's problems, but I don't know that it's going to be investing.
Yeah, when I was in grad school, right, the joke was, nanotech, it's been 5 years away for 10 years. Like every year, it's always, so it's one of those things. Quantum computing, it's coming eventually.
That is what you hear a lot if you're a Cleveland Browns fan. We're 5 years away, and it's been that for 25 years. The money cog, who I will point out, the only real cog is a Cogswell cog, suggests ag tech. That's agricultural technology. I actually think, I don't know what the investment plays are here, but I do think as we head to the stars, which is something I think we're going to do in the next 20 to 40 years, maybe a little sooner than that, we are going to have to figure out how to grow food in different ways. And we're starting to see practical products and applications of that. And, things like vertical gardens, which weren't a thing, at least a mainstream thing a few years ago, are readily available. So Max, this is close to your space. Is it one you believe in?
Yeah, so in terms of like space, right? We always talk about like Tesla or the Blue Origins or NASA, whoever, right? And the important thing to remember is all of those space companies aren't going to be going anywhere if they don't have biology, right? We need to grow food, we need to purify water, we need breathable air on a Mars colony or a lunar base. So we do need some pretty good advances in industrial biotech to grow foods and grow materials for building, right? I can shoot people up into space with a test tube of microbes that are going to expand and grow. It's a lot harder to bring thousands of tons of concrete up to space, right? In terms of ag tech investing opportunity here on Earth, I think again this is kind of a space that's a little hypey. It's also a pretty broad term, right? Ag tech can be digital platforms for surveilling millions of acres of farmland. We have another question here I see also in ag tech, and it's like indoor farming and things like hydroponics. So there's some great opportunities there, but it's mostly niche. You have to remember, agriculture requires, tens of millions of acres just in the United States. It's very land intensive to grow the volume of food we need. So it sounds great to put these things indoors, but you're limited by how much space you have, right? So yeah, it's a niche application. I can see it supplementing food production, maybe in certain regions, but in terms of the actual opportunity or an investing opportunity, I think it's still relatively limited.
So let's recap a little bit. Space concrete, terrible investment. You don't want your money in space concrete. And a lot of these spaces, and kind of the reason we're doing this show today, is I do feel like a lot of times people who view themselves as long-term investors are chasing things that are going to be 30 times in a year because it explodes. And here's the reality. That's not typical. Typical is that Google buys some 4-person startup you've never heard of, and all of a sudden they're 3D printing, new lungs, and it doesn't become an investing opportunity unless you were the rich guy who started that 4-person company. So I do think you want to be careful. Here's another one from Sparta16. If you want to put that question up, Sam. He asks about ad tech. He talks about a company named Acuity, and he wants to know if there are any thoughts on increased engagement with ad tech. And here's what I would say is your best advertising technology plays are Roku and Google. They're companies that have massive amount of ad data that are being able to deliver efficient ads. That doesn't mean, I don't know Acuity, doesn't mean there won't be other companies, that are in that process. The Trade Desk has obviously done well for a lot of people, but this idea that you're going to have startups that come into spaces where giants control most of the inventory, it happens, but it's not typical. Max, I know this is not your space, but do you feel that ad tech works? And I will say, I don't feel that I'm ever getting served ads, or not ever, but usually for what I would actually want. I feel like there's a long way for this to go.
Yeah, and I left my tinfoil hat in the other room, Dan, but I'm very pro privacy. So I have some interesting takes on how advertising works today, and it's kind of built on this surveillance model, right? And a couple of privacy laws could really change how this industry operates. So again, I don't know a lot of the players in this space, but the largest companies are probably ones that will continue to win, and they might have a trickier time too if there was even some very basic low-level privacy laws that get introduced here in the next decade. So, is this opportunity maxed out? I don't know, but advertising has kind of been this eternal industry, right? It's been there for hundreds or thousands of years. So I can't imagine it can go anywhere, but it might look a lot different in 5 or 10 years.
I think there's a huge market in better advertising, more focused advertising, where literally the Super Bowl is making more money because not every ad is going to every person or every home. And instead of paying $5.5 million for an ad that goes to everybody, maybe somebody's paying $4 million, somebody's paying $2 million, somebody's paying $1 million, but the same broadcast, you're getting the right ad for you. I think there's a lot of technology. Obviously, Roku can do that, but it only knows so much about me. Like somehow it knows that I have been looking at used cars. The problem is when I buy a used car, I won't need another used car. That is a big problem in this technology. I'm not as big a fan of privacy. I am someone who is very public. It is not hard to find my personal email address or probably my phone number. My wife has told me to not say where I live specifically on air, so I try to not give away my address, but I am pretty easy to find. I'd love to be able to go in and say, you know what kind of ads I want? Boy, I love superhero shows. Like, could you give me every trailer for a superhero show or movie that's coming up? Oh, and by the way, like I'm thinking about buying a new monitor to replace my monitor with the hole in it. Like, can you start giving me some ads for that? Like, whatever it is, I agree with what Max says. Like, it is creepy sometimes, the ads you're being served where like you just like looked at something in Target, you didn't say it out loud, and then you go home and there's ads for it everywhere. It's like, that's not great. Like, so I do want to see more privacy, but we are going to switch gears in a second. We are going to talk about some new Pfizer vaccine news. Before we do that, Chooch, we appreciate your comment. AI will be powering all future tech. That part I agree with. Advanced neural networks. So neural networks, Max, that's like implants or headgear where like you could do brainier stuff and control. It's like what Elon Musk was testing with pigs. I kind of don't feel like that's going to be a thing. Am I wrong?
No, neural networks, like machine learning, how to integrate data, I believe.
That makes more sense. That's why Max is here and not just me.
Yeah, I mean, again, AI, it's yeah, I don't know. It's powering a lot of things increasingly, right? Healthcare, renewable energy, when to send power to where in the grid. A lot of these very complex systems, AI or machine learning's great. You need to have enough data. You need to know how to train your algorithms, right? You need to have annotated data. You need to know what the data say. So just having a bunch of data is not that valuable if you don't know what to do with it. But yeah, we're increasingly seeing it used and provide value. Again, man, I sound like I'm such a Luddite, huh? But like, there is a lot of hype around AI, and a lot of companies say the term, oh, AI, we're using artificial intelligence to do some stuff. And then, it can be a little misleading, I think.
So we'd happily take some more questions and comments. But Max, let's do a little bit of a promotion here. So I was away last week. I was volunteering and getting my second vaccine dose. And a number of times someone asked me, well, what do I do? What is 7 Investing? And it's really easy to say we share our 7 best stock picks every month. But when I really thought about it, what we do is we make investing something that's for everybody. And there's a lot of people watching that are pretty seasoned investors. They know how the market works. There's a lot of people that are going, oh my God, did I miss out on GameStop? Should I have bought AMC? I feel like as much as we're here for the seasoned guys who want our picks and really know what to do with them, that we're here, that this show and the 7 Investing subscription is for the person that's pretty sure they should be in the stock market and don't know what that means, that wants to know every step of the process. So like when we do our new members call, we talk through basic things like how do you get a brokerage account? On this show, we just did a show last week. What is long-term investing? And, we talk about that fear of missing out is not that important. It doesn't really matter when you buy a good company. Valuation can matter, but buying it Monday versus buying it Wednesday generally isn't that important. Or just because something's hit an all-time high doesn't mean that's time to sell it. Or sort of tuning out all these people who are talking about price targets and charts and brokers who are giving you advice based on the fact that the more moves you make, the more money they make. I feel like what we do is make something that seems really complicated really easy for everybody. Max, tell the people how they can subscribe to 7 Investing.
Yeah, Dan, absolutely. I mean, long-term investing is absolutely your biggest advantage as an individual investor. And a lot of it's just about suppressing emotion, just buying a good company, knowing what you're getting into, and then just holding it for a longer period of time than, a day trader or, don't get into penny stocks. So I think we provide a lot of insight that maybe beginning investors don't have access to. It's not really always readily available in a palatable format. So that's what we do. If you want to subscribe to 7 Investing, you can go to 7investing.com/subscribe. Make it very easy. $17 a month. Also an option for $170 per year, which is an even better value, Dan. I don't know what the math works out to. I forget, but it's less than $17 a month.
That is 2 months for free. So we are happy about that. And of course, if you follow us on @7investing on Twitter, you might find us sharing one of our members who share their referral code every member gets a referral code for every person who signs up. Not only does that new person get a deal, they get it for $10 a month, the member gets a free month. We have people who are going to keep me working well past old age here that have, 5, 6, 7 years. Well, that's not that old, but 5, 6, 7 years of free membership because they like the product so much and they share it. So Max, I got the Pfizer vaccine and I got to be around at my first volunteer appointment. I was around the pharmacists who were taking this out of cold storage, mixing the vaccine. It has to be sort of reconstituted and then put into individual syringes. I got to see this. There were some very strict parameters for how this had to be handled, but Pfizer actually thinks this could change. Max, do you want to explain what this news is?
Yeah, so Pfizer's been collecting data from batches of its vaccine that's collected when it was in clinical trials and even some of the first that were distributed and to go into the arms of Americans or Europeans around the world. And it went to the FDA and it said, hey, look, we have data that show, our vaccine is viable at a warmer temperature, right? So if Sam can show the graphic that I have there, but a lot of the first two vaccines from Moderna and Pfizer, also it's really a BioNTech vaccine, are based on mRNA technology. And that's great. It has a lot of advantages, but one of the disadvantages is RNA molecules like to degrade. They're not very stable. So they have to be kept at very cold temperatures in order to keep their stability. So as you can see, Moderna is at negative 20 degrees Celsius for their storage temperatures for how long it can remain stable at. I think this graphic is for 6-month viability. And for BioNTech and Pfizer's vaccine, it's at negative 70 degrees Celsius. That's colder than where Steve is in Montana most of the time. So the data that Pfizer and BioNTech have show that this vaccine can actually be viable at kind of closer to negative 20 degrees Celsius for 2 weeks. So it's not forever. It still has to be shipped in colder storage containers and specialized equipment. But, at this point in our vaccine drive as a country, there's no reason that this has to be stored anywhere for 30 days, right? We should be sending these out and putting these in the arms and shoulders everywhere, every chance we get right now. So if we can increase the temperature that you can store the Pfizer vaccine, that makes a lot of these distribution and logistical bottlenecks a lot easier to manage, right? So maybe we can distribute this in different regions or localities, maybe suburban or rural communities that don't have as much of the medical infrastructure as a negative 70 or negative 80 degree freezer would require. So this can really help. And especially, we have the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which is coming soon. I believe there's an advisory panel for that this Friday at the FDA. So that should be approved maybe this weekend or early next week. So we'll have 3 vaccines soon from 3 major producers. That's going to make it much easier as we get into the spring to distribute more vaccines and probably vaccinate most Americans that are eligible, by the end of the spring, by the summer. I think that's very plausible.
So a couple of notes here. First of all, I just love the idea that Steve in Montana just keeps the vaccine outside. Like you don't even need any special equipment. It's not that cold there. The second thing is if you go someplace to get vaccinated and they don't do it in your upper arm around the shoulder, you're not at a vaccine place. So if they ask you to take your pants off or any other sort of vaccination, they are not giving you the COVID vaccine. You have fallen for a scam. I'm teasing a little bit, but there are a lot of COVID scams out there. So be really, really careful to make sure you've actually got an appointment at a legitimate center. It's really easy in most communities to know where the vaccine is being given out, that those places will increase soon.
Wait, Dan, I bought all these vaccines online. What do you mean?
And be very wary of, Max, I'm sure you've seen all these commercials where it's like, it's 99.9 effective at containing the virus. And like, it's great if you buy like a wipe or a spray or whatever, or a UV light, but that's not the same as wearing a mask and following good procedures and doing what you're supposed to do. Be really wary of like companies you've never heard of making claims that are pretty far out there.
Yeah.
Give the medical take there.
That's true. I always love that actually. Before the pandemic, right? You have like sanitizer that says it's 99.9% effective. Well, with biology, you have like billions and trillions of cells. So that 0.1% that's not effective, that's still like billions of cells. That's more than enough in terms of as biology is concerned to infect you or whatever. So yes, absolutely. Wear a mask, get vaccinated when you can. Be wary of all these claims that are out there. There's a lot of people trying to profit off of this.
So Max, I'm seeing all sorts of like competing timelines here. So let's pretend we get efficient enough and we have enough vaccine and enough willing Americans that, let's say, 75% of the population, including kids, say at least 16 and older, are vaccinated by the end of the summer. What does that mean in terms of return to normal? I think that in the investing world, the whole return to normal is something a lot of people are concerned about and sort of, ready to have happen. But it doesn't mean everything is okay, right? If we get to those numbers.
Yeah, that's true. So I think by July or sometime in July, the United States expects to have 600 million doses available. So there's only 330 million Americans, but for each of these mRNA vaccines, you need 2 doses, right? So if you exclude children who currently cannot get vaccinated because we don't have the data for that yet, we don't know the dosing that is needed to provide protection for children, basically everyone that wants a vaccine can get 1 or both doses, certainly by July, by this summer. So that sets things up pretty well for the fall in terms of returning to a significant degree of normalcy. But I think, we've already had health leaders come out recently and say just that. Yes, by this fall, by this winter, we should be in pretty good shape compared to the last year. But we also might need to wear face masks in 2022 as well. With the virus potentially mutating as well, you have to consider that every person that gets infected is an opportunity for the virus to mutate off of a vaccine or off of some of our antibody drugs. We've already seen that playing out in South Africa with some of those variants. So we do not want that to happen. So the longer we can all, protect each other and ourselves, the, higher chances we have to actually put the pandemic behind us.
Last question, Max, and then we'll hit the home stretch. We're going to do just a quick one for the home stretch today. We're gonna skip what we had planned. We had planned to talk about Disney taking on the NFL. I'm gonna bump that to Wednesday or Friday show. I thought this was kind of too important. Max, I've seen a lot of, let's call it analytical or we believe data about whether vaccinated people can pass it on or have a lesser chance. And we don't have that data yet. And I read about this today because they weren't swabbing people's noses, because that's the first place the virus goes, is the mucus lining of the nose, of the eyes, of places where you don't get it, but you might carry it on. When are we going to get actual data on whether the fact that I'm vaccinated makes it safer for my wife and child who I'm around regularly without a mask?
I actually have no idea, so I don't want to comment too much on that. I don't want to give out health advice just speaking off the cuff. I would say, though, once you've been sick, then you have a much lower chance of passing it on, right? That's been the guideline for a year. If you've been sick and you quarantine, after so many days, it's okay to leave quarantine because you can't pass it on anymore. So I would expect the same thing to be true for vaccines.
So I should have shared the story I read with you. It basically says that they're doing those studies now, that many of the people in the initial vaccine studies, it doesn't end when they approve the vaccine. So those people are now going in to see what their viral loads are. And again, anecdotally, the initial data shows that you probably have a much lower chance of spreading it. And we will see in the next few weeks, months, depends how they process the data, some guidelines on that and sort of what it means. Like, I know, my wife wouldn't be thrilled if I gave her a mild case of it, but if that was the risk, that would be a different risk profile than if it was likely she could still get a full-blown case of it, even if I, have mostly immunity. So with that said, we're going to go right to the home stretch. And it's one question. We're going to, Roman Michael asks, and I hope you have some thoughts on this, because this was not in the chat here. This was in my Facebook stream, which did not pop up on the chat. And he says, Max, do you have any thoughts on 23andMe going public via merger in the next few months? I have thoughts, but I'll give Max the first word here.
Can't wait. I think it's going through like a SPAC, right? 23andMe. So this is complicated, right? But when people hear genetic testing, I think everyone thinks that's one thing. And the reality is it's not. There's a lot of nuance into those different products or how companies go about reading the genome or genes, things like that, right? So my analogy, and I hate analogies, but I think this is okay. When you hear genetic testing and you think this is big opportunity, every time you hear the word or the term genetic testing, I want you to think beverage industry, right? So imagine if people were talking about the beverage industry being this great opportunity. It's going to be full of growth. There's a beverage revolution, right? Whatever hypey marketing terms you want to use. That means almost nothing, right? What kind of beverages are we talking here? Are we talking about infant formula? Are we talking about alcoholic beverages or like aged whiskey? there's a lot of beverages, and that's the same exact thing for genetic testing. So with 23andMe, it's mostly low level. We call it genotype data. So it has like population level data, right? From everybody spitting in tubes and mailing it in. And they're trying to say they can sell that to drug companies. And that's useful somehow to them. And it might be, and they've sold some of the data for a lot of money. I would question though, as we get better at providing higher quality data at lower cost, that opportunity for these population level companies might fizzle out. It might not be a sustainable opportunity. And also, health isn't about what genes you possess. It's about what genes you are expressing. So you might have a gene that says you're more likely to get prostate cancer, but you could also live to be 130 and run a marathon at the age of 110. So having that gene doesn't really tell you a whole lot. So I would be a little more cautious and dig into the nuance around a lot of these, genetic testing companies. There's a lot of ways to do it. Not all of them are the equivalent opportunity.
The core product for 23andMe is a novelty product. It is, get some genetic information, find out if you have siblings you didn't know about. That can get some people in trouble. But here's the reality. It's kind of like a step beyond like the 8-foot teddy bear or like having a star named after you. Like, I get it. There's some useful information. They might sell it. But to me, this does not feel like an investable company. And we don't have an S1 because it's not a traditional IPO. Any company like this, give it a couple of quarters of reporting earnings and have the SEC requirements for what they're putting out there give you a much better window into what you will learn than just going, oh, it's a company I heard of, genetic testing, that should be big. Like, you'll know a lot more 2 quarters from now than you know right now. Sam Bailey, it is time to hit our finisher. Which industry has the least chance of being successful for investors? So Max, I asked this question, and Sam, I'm going to talk to Max for a minute, so you can put it back up in a second. I asked this question because I got food delivery this weekend. I ordered from DoorDash, and this is not a unique to DoorDash problem. I've had the same problem with all the food delivery people, but we ordered from the Cheesecake Factory. And right now, your driver cannot look in the bag and see if your order is there for obvious reasons. We ordered 3 entrees. My wife got a salad, my son got a flatbread pizza, and I got the spicy cashew chicken. So mine would have weighed twice what theirs weighed. What showed up? My son's pizza, my wife's salad. So I contact DoorDash, which has still not responded. I tagged them on Twitter. I contacted them the correct way for customer service, but I also called them out on Twitter.
Yeah, calling them out on Twitter. That's the best way. Do that.
Because here's what happens when you report this via customer service. They refund your money. Now, I don't want a refund. I want my spicy cashew chicken. That is the problem. Like, this would be like, and I use this analogy online, if United Airlines flew me West Palm to LA, but stopped in Denver and went, hey, you're on your own to get to LA, but here's $42 back. No, that's not. So I think the customer service problem that this business has is insurmountable because they don't care. I've had the same thing happen for DoorDash, Uber Eats, and Grubhub. None of them say, okay, the issue is you didn't get some of your food. Here's how you can get some of your food. You can go pick it up yourself and we'll give you $100 back. We'll deliver it to you, but it's going to take 20 minutes or whatever it is. That needs to be solved. So Sam, if you could bring the graphic back up, you can tell which one I don't like, but ride sharing got 17.7%. I also don't think ride sharing is ever going to be a viable business until we have automated cars. And if we have automated cars, that business is going to look very different. Cannabis is a tough business to be in as well. Food delivery won at 41.3%, and space tourism came in at 26.3%. I actually think space tourism will eventually be a massive business. I just don't know if that eventually is 10 years from now or when my kid has grandkids. Like, it's haven't figured that one out. Max, what's your thought on this question here?
Yeah, I think, cannabis, you brought this up earlier. There's a lot of bad companies out there, but that's an opportunity that is going to be successful, I think, for the right businesses and the ones that execute. Space tourism, maybe that's a niche luxury thing for a while if that ever takes off, but that could still be big. I would go with either ride sharing or food delivery. They just seem to be based on these really poor economic assumptions. You can either charge too much and then nobody wants to use your service, or you charge too little and then who wants to deliver food for $3 an hour? So it's this weird, just being the middleman doesn't work. And like you said, when you're the middleman, you don't care. You don't have customer service. Like, it's, what are they out, right? So it's,
and people always say, well, what about automated drones? And I'm not sure most municipalities, Max, we both live in cities of different densities, but I'm not sure my HOA complex wants drones delivering me a pizza. And how would that work in New York City? Like, you live on like the 15th floor. How many people will fall to their death trying to get a burrito off the drone? Like, that doesn't seem practical to me. And we do see some robot last mile delivery with Amazon and other people, but we are a long time away from this happening. So who does delivery well? Domino's does delivery well. If you have a product people really, really want, it might make sense for 3 or 4 restaurants to team up on a delivery service, or some of these, big chains that have a density to do it on their own. But Domino's is still cheap. They're really good at delivering. They provide full transparency with their tracker app. And I could 99.9% guarantee if I called Domino's up and said, I ordered 4 pizzas and you sent me 1, that they would then just send someone else with 3 pizzas. That is the correct solution for the problem.
And I'm sorry, with like, I have a lot of local restaurants that maybe because of the pandemic, you can now order online on their website. So doesn't that kind of change the need for them to go through Uber Eats or one of these other food delivery companies? If you can order on their website and then they have delivery drivers, doesn't that kind of take the convenience back and they're in control of that again?
It does, and I'd rather pay for the better experience. So our initial order on Saturday night was we tried to order from a local Japanese steakhouse here on, I think it was on Uber Eats, it might have been DoorDash, might have been Grubhub, it doesn't matter. And someone called me and said, hey, they don't have this item on your order. And I said, is this the restaurant? They said, no, it's Uber Dash or whichever one I was using. And I said, wait, are you just calling my order into the restaurant and they're not actually on your platform? They said yes, and I canceled my order. Because 1, there's no way the sushi place was out of salmon. That is absolutely impossible. And 2, if the restaurant didn't agree to be on the platform, this method they use of like taking the order anyway and calling it in doesn't account for things like specials, price changes. Like, it shouldn't be legal. It is not a great system. There should be full disclosure when that happens. You've all heard my rant on that before. So Max, I'm going to end the show. I appreciate you doing this. We appreciate so many people watching. How can you get in touch with us? It's really easy. If you want to email us, and email things that are questions about our service, questions about how the site works, problems you might be having. Don't email us about an individual stock. That's better for Twitter. But you can email us at info@7investing.com. It'll get sent to the right person. And if you want to ask some of those like broader stock market questions that you think might be useful on 7 Investing Now, or useful to a broad audience, that is at 7 Investing, the number 7, Investing on Twitter. We're really responsive. But generally, like today, I had a bunch of people throw some penny stocks at me. And oh, wow, there was new. We don't cover penny stocks. We're not interested in penny stocks. We are trying to make investing in good companies available to as many people as possible. We appreciate you coming along for the journey. For Maxx Chatsko, I am Dan Kline. We will see you Wednesday.